This is Back to Back.
Yo, what's up, Back-to-Backers? This is Willie Joy. Welcome to the show. This is Back to Back. This is my podcast. As always, happy to be here with you. How is everybody doing? How's everybody feeling? How was your week? Happy Tuesday, assuming you're listening to this on a Tuesday. Let's get into this show. My guest on the show is none other than Matt Zo. I like this one a lot. Fascinating guy. I think it's safe to say almost universally respected in the industry for the high quality of his music, the boundary pushing. He's always been kind of an enigmatic figure to me. Maybe that's just because I had never met him before, but I was really interested to do this. I thought it turned out great. We're going to get into that in just a minute. He's got a brand new track out right now called Vice. It's out on his own label, which is called Mad Zoo. We talk about the label, we talk about the tune, everything in this conversation. And keep your eyes peeled because he has an upcoming EP on Anjunabeats where it all started for him back to the trance roots. I don't have a release date for that, but I know it's coming soon, so keep your eyes open. Before we get into that conversation, let me do a quick rundown on the business of the show. As always, I want to highly recommend the Spotify playlist that I make for this show. That is a playlist that I update every single week with brand new music from my guests, myself, music that we discuss in the show, other related songs that I think you might like. I promise it is not just a way for me to promote whatever my new projects are. I know that's kind of what every single DJ does. And yeah, some of my new shit is in there, but really I curate this a lot. There's going to be some cool stuff you haven't heard before. It's not the same old thing. It's called the Back to Bangers playlist. You can find a link to that in the description of this episode. I've been getting great feedback on it, so go check it out. And if you do check it out and you think it sucks and you want to yell at me, all you have to do is email backtobackpod@gmail.com, or you can hit me up at Willie Joy or at backtobackpod on all social media. You know, I default to the negative view because it's funny, but if you like it, yeah, I'd like to hear that too. And if you really like it, if you really like this whole show, if you like what we're doing here at Back to Back, help us spread the word, help us grow, tell a friend about us. That is the best way you can support this show. You know, we don't ask for your money. We don't really do advertising. I'm not saying we never will, but we haven't so far. So the best way that you can help us grow is by telling somebody. And that could be a tweet, that could be a post, that could just be retweeting our accounts. That could just be running into a friend who you know loves music and telling them to check out Back to Back. Whatever it is, I know a lot of people out there are doing that. Every day I see it. It means a lot. I appreciate it, and it truly does help. You can also subscribe to this show on whatever platform you're listening on. That way, every time I post an episode, you'll get it straight to you the second it's out. You don't have to worry about missing a thing. Leave us a rating and a review on iTunes if you're listening there. You know, I think all artists out there, anybody that you think is doing cool stuff, they deserve your support. This is a way you can do it for free, and it takes about 30 seconds. All right, so for this conversation with Matt Zo, I met up with him. Oh, man, I got to tell you, the context for this interview was bizarre. We did it in the basement of his hotel, and the space that they gave us to record in was this creepy abandoned nightclub in the basement of this hotel. I'd actually been there once before. I recorded the Hero Bust episode there and then totally forgot about it, probably because it was sort of scarring and nightmarish. But once again, here we were back in this abandoned, huge club that I don't understand why it's there. And to make things weirder, there was all this kind of creepy art on the walls. There were these sort of cartoony Street Fighter characters, but instead of Street Fighter, the logo said Child Cancer Fighter. I can't make this up. It was every bit as weird as it sounds, probably weirder, and you'll hear us kind of be weirded out at the start by it. So yeah, that's where we were. Good times. I think we both ended up getting a kick out of it, and it was just great to talk to him. I've always been really intrigued by him. If you're a fan, if you follow him, you know he's always been, very outspoken, very much blazing his own trail, so to speak. He's also quick to speak up about issues that he sees happening in the music industry, in the dance scene. He's been very vocal about problems that he sees and things that he's excited about. And I think you can really tell with his music, too. He's just excited to push boundaries, discover new sounds, keep learning, keep creating. I think that really comes across in this conversation. We talk about it all, man. We talk about working with people like Porter Robinson, Kill the Noise. We talk about starting his own label, Mad Zoo. He came from the trance world. I find that really fascinating because it's something I know less about. And now actually he's kind of making a little return to it. Keep listening for more details on that. And yeah, this was just fun, man. I had a great time with this one. Don't forget, Matt Zo has a new track called Vice. It's out right now. And keep an eye peeled for his new EP on Anjunabeats coming soon. So let's get into it right now. This is me and Matt Zo back to back. Let's go. God, this is such a weird space.
Yeah. I like it.
I really
do like it.
I feel like we're doing something we're not supposed to do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it feels like we're definitely not supposed to be here.
Wait a minute. Child cancer fighter? Do you see this?
Yes, I'm kind of confused.
What the fuck is happening? Okay, so we just started recording. We're in an empty club, abandoned club, and on the wall there is two Street Fighter paintings that say "Child Cancer Fighter."
Yeah, in a hotel, I should add.
Right, we're in the basement of a hotel. So just to, I hope everybody listening is with us here.
Yeah, welcome.
Welcome to our terrible nightmare. But this is great, man. Thanks for taking a little time to talk to me.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Right now, so what are you in town to do? You're on like a house music tour right now?
Yeah, it's sort of a tour. Yeah, I'm just playing a few house shows around and playing one here at Bang Bang.
Nice, man. So the house shows, you're playing just house music. I know you put out the house EP recently. Mm-hmm. How have those shows been? Is it kind of refreshing, a change of pace?
Yeah, I mean, I don't usually just stick to house anyway, but it's sort of house orientated, which it's nice to just like play one kind of style or at least like tempo for a whole set, because
Sure.
I used to go pretty crazy and change it up a lot, and I kind of prefer sometimes just to have a flow.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way because I'm very much like you were saying you used to be. Like I go all over the map, genre to genre, tempo to tempo at will. And it's kind of how my brain works. I feel like maybe it's the same with you.
Yeah.
But then sometimes I think just in terms of putting on a good show and having a good connection with the audience, it can be better to pull it back a little bit.
Right. It's like my tastes are varied, but when I go out to a club, I don't really want to hear it. So I'm trying to do more of what I'd actually want to hear at a club and have fun,
I think that's the best way. Yeah, that's actually a theme that's come up on this show a lot is, some of the most successful people or the most inspiring people are the ones who kind of just put out into the world what they would like for themselves. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah, who is coming at this point in your career? Somebody goes to a Matt Zo show. Do you think they have certain expectations of what you're going to do? Are there songs you feel like you have to play?
I feel like there's like two different types of, there's loads of different fans, but I get a lot of these two types of fans. One, they want to hear trance
right.
a lot, and the other
still holding on,
and the other want to hear like drum and bass. So it's the two ends of the spectrum,
right?
And I've got to accommodate for, right? So
how do you navigate that?
I accommodate neither. No, I try to sometimes throw in a bit of trance and a bit of drum and bass influence. But yeah, I try and meet somewhere in the middle, which is difficult.
Yeah. It was interesting when I knew I was coming to talk to you. I was sort of thinking about the arc of your career and the music you were making at different eras in your career, and I was wondering at what point you decided to start branching out and diversifying your output to the public, and if that was a difficult moment, if it was hard for people to follow along, or if you were nervous about it.
Well, I mean, it seemed a natural thing to do to me because when I started, I was a lot more varied than I am now, actually. I was making all kinds of weird stuff.
Well,
But,
am I correct in saying that you were first known for trance for a few years?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and then shortly after that, I had a release with Hospital, and that got some kind of version of success.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, no, I've always been a really varied artist, so it was like I had to do it.
Sure.
just to be myself.
Yeah. And maybe it sounds like if you've had that tone or those inclinations for a large part of your career, maybe people just expect that from you
Right.
at this point.
Yeah, and also I was really young when I was like going through that.
How
So,
young?
like 21, 22 when
Okay,
I was
yeah.
like making the decision to branch out. And I think when you're younger, you're a lot more, you just don't think about the consequences, and you don't think about, will my fans like this? You don't even, at the time I didn't really think like about having fans.
Right.
It's like-
You weren't even thinking about the bigger picture of how this will affect
Exactly.
your career. Yeah. Do you miss those days?
Yeah, I
being
do
more
in
carefree,
some ways, but I
Quote
try and
unquote, less responsible.
right. I try and hark back to that. Like I try and get in that mindset as much as possible.
How do you do that? I'm asking only for personal interest.
It's hard. One of the ways is just detaching for a long time. I had a year where I was like just not really writing music, trying to like, develop myself as a person.
And were you
that-
still on the road? Were you still...
Hardly. I
Okay.
mean, a little bit just to stay afloat, but yeah, I just taking some time off and doing something that is completely unrelated to this whole industry is like definitely.
I love that advice, man, because I think there's this unspoken agreement that we all have that if you stop, you've failed, you know?
Right.
And like if you take time off, you've just like set yourself back. There's this
Yeah.
weird mentality that you just can't stop.
I don't know where that comes from because history has proven time and time again that, you know, the arc of someone's career is not linear, nor is it, you know, one bell curve. You know, it's always at least 2 or 3 humps of.
Oh,
of-
sure. And if
it's
you
like-
look at, I think, the artists with the most longevity in the game, not all of them, but there's some good examples. They're the people who have kind of reinvented themselves over and over again.
Right.
Because it's, I mean, you know, if you even take like your early years in trance music as an example, right? You know, if you had just stuck to trance and it was 2018 and you were still just doing more trance, you know?
Right.
Like, I think there's probably a ceiling on that. Whereas if you keep evolving your music as you evolve as a person, that's probably a much more interesting arc to follow.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
You elaborated. perfectly.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I did one of these episodes with Paul Oakenfold recently.
Oh, yeah.
Which was very interesting. Crazy.
Yeah, I bet.
Crazy dude. Yeah. A lot of great stories. But one of the last things we talked about was, you know, I kind of asked him in this crazy career of his, you know, what were the low moments and what were kind of the hard times? Because, you know, you just hear about all of his crazy accolades. And he was saying that kind of for him, you know, he was like the herald of trance music, and then all of a sudden trance wasn't cool
Right.
anymore. And that was really hard for him to sort of adjust to not being on the main stage anymore and
Right.
being in the fourth tent on the left. And
But to all of us, you never seem to dip. You know, it's like
Right.
from the outside, your challenges and your hard times don't really seem like hard times to other people. It's usually just internal and completely psychological.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I don't know if you're this way, but I'm very much in the way that I analyze my own career much more than anyone else does.
Right.
And, I think that people are perceiving all these things that no one is even noticing.
Right.
And
And it's harder now with the internet because you see all your numbers.
Oh, God, yeah.
And that's the most disillusioning thing you can.
Yeah. Yeah. When you start judging yourself by those numbers, which
Right.
I feel like you've had an interesting relationship to social media in that, you've been at times very outspoken, calling out things that you don't like or things you'd like to see happening in the music community. But then other times you kind of took a step back. Is that right? Or
Right.
even got rid of it entirely?
Yeah, I mean, I've been on both sides of that for sure.
Where do you sit with it now?
I mean, sometimes I have the urge to say something, but nowadays when I really want to say something, profound, I think first, have I like searched long enough? Have I like read enough or, dug deep enough into what I'm talking about to be able to really,
Right.
is it better to talk about a subject or is it better just to keep on learning and setting an example? And yeah.
That's a great question, too. I'm pretty quiet on social media just in general. There's very few things that occur in my head that I really think other people need to be aware of.
Right.
And that's an interesting thing because I do wonder sometimes you see the people who do speak out all the time and just use social media constantly.
Right.
For some of them, it's very successful as a tool and maybe as a way of letting people get to know them if in an ideal world, right? But I don't know. For me, I tend to fall on your side where I hope that people can just see what I do and
Right.
take it as they will.
Yeah, that doesn't stop me making a few jabs, though. I mean,
Well, because I'm curious how you look at being outspoken at this point. Like if you look back at some of whatever you want to call it, the Twitter beefs or just the statements you've made. Do you think there have been times where a positive outcome has come from it?
I don't think a net positive outcome has ever come from it. No, maybe like a temporary high, but that's now how I see social media. Like,
Just as a temporary high.
yeah, it's just a dopamine hit at the end of the day, and that's what I've come to realize it was. And but I think a lot of the things I was saying might have held true, but doesn't mean that me saying them has had a positive effect.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good distinction in that I think there's some issues in the music industry, and especially in dance music, that many of us are just aware of on a constant basis. But yeah, maybe yelling about it in certain ways.
I mean, it's good to make people aware of it,
Yeah.
but I don't know. It hasn't gone away. It's not gonna be less of a problem just because one person says something.
Sure.
I think,
I mean, maybe the positive spin on it is that by speaking up, you attract like-minded people and you can kind of find your way to your own community that you'd like to be a part of.
That definitely has happened, yeah. But I wouldn't encourage them to be, really loud about, issues like that. I mean,
Sure.
obviously everyone has issues that they're passionate about, but yeah, I just wish I was more thoughtful in the way that I could have written music about what I was talking about. I could have, done something more creative than just spout on social media.
Sure. Well, and it's interesting for you to talk about, kind of finding people, but then telling them not to do as you did, because it seems like especially in the last few years, you have your label, Mad Zoo, and from what I understand, there's a certain level of mentorship that you take on with the artists you work with, and even just kind of the artists circling what you do. And it was something I wanted to ask you about, if that was always a goal for you in starting a label, or if mentorship is the best word I can think of, is something that just kind of came later as you noticed that, there are all these young artists who might not know the best path.
Right. But I mean, not so much mentorship as providing a good circle of people to, listen to.
Sure. Just a good community.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I try and give people guidance about production and, everything music related. But when it comes to the music industry side of things, I think people should, learn on their own and learn their own path.
Okay, so you'll be a little more hands off with that?
Yeah, I don't tell people not to do anything as a general rule.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just try and lead by example, even though sometimes, I'm still growing.
Sure, of course. It's interesting to think about because I'm guessing you work with some pretty young artists on the label. And it's always interesting to see a young artist come in because the game is so different now than when we were their age.
Right.
And so maybe we're not even qualified to give certain advice.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Like, I have a lot more to learn from some of these kids than they do from me.
It's scary how good some of these kids are.
Right. Yeah,
so
and
early.
and how clear a vision they have. And
that's true too. That's another thing I was thinking about in reference to your career, because I think one of the hallmarks, one of the many things that you're known for is really top-notch sound design, top-notch mixing, just general quality of sound. And I think when you started, like way back when, that maybe was less common than it is now. And I was sort of wondering for you how you kind of latched on to, that pristine sound quality and design that early when it wasn't kind of just swirling around.
I'm glad you say that. Because, I don't know.
Well,
that's always something I've really judged myself on. And I've been struggling for years. It's only been very recently where I've gotten to a place where I'm comfortable with my sound design and mixing. So for a long time, I think everyone can agree in the electronic music industry that Noisia have, they were first in the high end sound design game.
Yeah, no, they not only set the bar, but they probably made the bar themselves.
Yeah, they definitely made the bar, and definitely learning from them. I had the amazing opportunity to meet them and get to know them and learn from them
kind of
personally.
Early on.
In 2014 I met them, and I think from then on that was like the real change. So I attribute a lot of it to them for sure.
That's cool. How did that come about, or what form did that take?
Well, I've always been a fan of them, and we were all on tour together and on an Australian festival tour. So I got to hang out with them just as a coincidence, and
just hit it off.
From there it was great.
That's fantastic, man. So let's take it back a little bit for you, because I'm sort of interested in how you even came to dance music in the first place. Because as we're talking, I hear kind of a hint of a UK accent, but I think my understanding is that you weren't originally born there.
So I was born in the UK, but I moved soon after to Cleveland.
Okay.
For the first 10 years of my childhood.
Oh,
and
wow.
Then I moved back to London for the rest of my teenager.
Interesting, man. Shout out to Cleveland. I'm a Midwest dude.
Oh, yeah?
So Minneapolis and Chicago were home base for me, but I've spent many a strange night in Cleveland.
yeah, it's a strange place. It's interesting growing up there.
What was that like? I mean, I think of Cleveland as, I've never lived there, but I had some family there. I think of it as kind of a, like a working town, and can be rough in some areas.
Yeah. It's just, they say Cleveland is where all the people that didn't make it in New York go to make it.
That sounds about right.
But yeah, I don't know. I have good memories and bad memories, but yeah, there's a lot of great stuff about Cleveland. Like, there's a lot of great art and culture there. Actually, they have a great art museum and a huge music community.
Okay. That I was not even aware of that.
Yeah, their classical music scene is world renowned. And yeah, same
Did
with
any of
art
that? Did
college.
you intersect with any of that from up to age 10? Like,
Yeah, I
any
mean,
of it
my
stick
mom
with you.
My mom's a violinist, so she definitely made sure of that.
Okay, like a professional.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, Cleveland was a great place to grow up in many ways, but stifling in a lot of other ways.
What brought you out there? Was it her work?
Yeah, my parents split up, and my mom moved to Cleveland and took me. And then I moved back with my dad when I was 10 or 11, and that was the exact opposite.
Yeah. In London or somewhere else?
In London,
Okay.
yeah. And yeah, growing up there was eye-opening.
Wow. How did you feel? Do you remember at the time, like going over there and how you felt about it?
Yeah, I mean, Cleveland, for all of its like classical music and art culture, I felt very segregated there. I didn't really meet
Segregated in what sense?
racially and
Culturally?
economically. Every like most of America.
Yeah.
Everything's pretty segregated. And then London is the exact opposite. Everything is checkerboarded together and mixed, and everything has to interact. And I found that inspiring, and and it definitely had a huge impact.
What were you musical as a kid?
Yeah. No, my dad and both my parents made sure that I was really interested in music and art. And,
Okay. What does your dad do?
He's a painter.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you come from a strong art pedigree.
Yeah, they didn't really give me a chance to be a scientist or something.
Was that ever something you were even interested in?
No, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a neuroscientist.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's so... I love this because every single person I talk to on this show, basically the story is that, my parents tried to get me to concentrate on my school, but all I wanted to do was, jerk around and make music.
Yeah,
but I love hearing the reverse.
It's really funny. Like, I would collect office stationery as like a hobby. I really wanted to have like a desk job.
Oh man, that is incredible. And would your parents see this and kind of try to get you to do something weirder?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like, oh yeah, you don't hear that.
Yeah, I
Very
love
often.
that. Were you playing instruments?
Yeah, my mom started me off in violin when I was like 5, and
Okay.
then guitar I started playing when I was 8.
When did you start kind of taking your own initiative with it? Do you remember? And sort of doing something more than just what your teachers told you to do or what your parents wanted you to do with it?
Yeah, well, when I got my first computer when I was 11, I got some music software, because I had seen my brothers make music on their computers. And
Older brothers?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have 2 older brothers, and I just sort of really wanted to do that.
What software?
God, what? Well, I started on Logic 5
Okay.
when it was for a PC.
Man, starting on Logic at age 11 seems pretty intense, man.
Yeah, it didn't really work on my computer either very well, but I made like 1 or 2 like things out of it before I switched to Fruity Loops.
Okay. Do you still use Fruity Loops?
No.
Okay.
And that I switched from Fruity Loops to Ableton.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So at that time, what were you even trying to make?
Well, the first dance music I had ever heard was Daft Punk. Daft Punk, Chemical Brothers, Lemon Jelly.
Oh, okay.
were another one. But yeah, I just tried to copy them basically.
Wait, that name is so familiar, Lemon Jelly. Who
Yeah,
are they?
Lemon Jelly are like sort of, I'd call them acoustic breaks.
Okay.
They're like from the early thousands, and
Kind of like were they, lumped in with like Thievery Corporation and that
yeah, sort
style?
of, yeah,
Yeah. Chill out.
right, chill out, down tempo kind
Right.
of stuff. And yeah, I bought they were like one of the first CDs I ever bought because I liked the album cover.
Yeah, dude,
That's how it works.
Oh man, it's so crazy thinking about how we used to find music versus how we find
Right
it now.
No, I still try and find music based on the cover, especially
Really?
when I'm like actually record shopping for like old records for sampling. I almost 100% of the time go based on
Oh, I love
the album
that.
cover. And most of the time, I feel like they used to spend more, or at least invest more in the album artwork when the music was good, you know?
Yeah, I think that's true, actually. And sometimes you could tell if the art was really out there, that maybe there was something
Right.
interesting you were about to hear.
Yeah, the artwork expresses something about the music for sure.
Do you think that's been lost a little bit at this point?
I don't think that's necessarily been lost. I mean,
There's still great art out there.
right, but I think people look at the art less, or it's less of a, because it's not something that you actually own and pick up and look
Right.
at with your
It's
hands.
more, it's a 4 pixel by 4 pixel
Right.
square on your phone. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a
You
little
lose
harder.
you lose a relationship with it.
Yeah, that's interesting because I would do the same thing, man. I would go into this record store, just pick it up, look at the cover, buy it,
Yeah.
go home, see what it was.
Right.
Do you still do a lot of sampling, like from the record store
Mm-hmm.
sampling?
I try not to as much nowadays because I feel like it's gotten even more expensive now to clear samples.
Yeah, I think probably because people do it less, right?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's like a feedback effect.
Yeah,
And
just
yeah, so
diminishing returns.
yeah, so I've got one tune coming out in September. That's probably going to be my last tune that I use a really expensive sample.
Man.
But I still sample records for like, in weirder ways and like,
Sure. And I mean, I'm sure we all at some point in our lives have sampled creatively so that
Right.
really no one knew that we sampled.
Exactly.
And yeah.
But
it's-
yeah, nowadays I'm more excited about making everything from scratch. Like even synthesizing vocals, I'm really excited about now.
really?
Yeah.
Man, that is something I know very little about, but that sounds really interesting.
It's interesting and scary at the same time.
Is that related to the like Vocaloid stuff where what's the Hatsune?
Yeah, Hatsune. I forgot the name.
Yeah,
but
but basically the hologram pop star that tours around.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, a new version of that software just came out, which makes it so much more expressive and you can make it sound pretty scarily human.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. And have you put out music already using that?
There is one tune of mine on SoundCloud with an old version of Vocaloid, but I haven't used it.
Okay. Man, I'll be
anything
really
yet.
interested to hear what you do with it.
Yeah. No, I've already started one tune with it that sounds eerily
Right.
human.
Well, but that's kind of awesome because, if you think about how can we keep pushing boundaries, how can we keep it interesting, having a song with lyrics that's sung, but having no one actually singing it.
Yeah.
No one's doing that. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there are people like the Hatsu,
Right.
But
at least
it hasn't become a
For what
part
we
of-
do, in our little
It's still niche, right?
Yeah.
But I sometimes think if I should be doing, I'm a huge proponent of good talent, good singing. I feel like that's the most important thing, and if I'm synthesizing
Circumventing.
every single aspect of a vocal to make it sound exactly how I want it, is that such a good thing?
Well, I think it's at least a cool experiment because no matter how close you get it to sounding like a human, it's still not going to be
Right.
exact,
Of
right?
course, yeah.
And so I feel like those little nuances will make what you do stand out.
Right.
I guess we don't know if it's a good or a bad way yet,
Yeah.
but I like that experimenting. I mean, for you, is that something that keeps you here, that keeps you excited, is always kind of trying new techniques and
Yeah.
pushing the boundaries?
Every day, I'm like, most of what I do is working on my sound design. So I feel like I'm more of a scientist than an artist sometimes.
That's interesting.
Because every day when I go into the studio, I'm trying to make new sounds and use plugins in different ways and just trying to advance my trick toolbox.
Sure. How much do you feel like you rely on your musical background in terms of, classical training?
Mm-hmm.
Does that play, how much of a role does that play in your day-to-day studio time?
That I mean, I try and detach that sometimes when I'm doing sound design. Obviously, I feel like the way I was raised, it's never gonna go away because it was so like pounded into me.
You're right.
So I try and focus as hard as like I can just on the sound of it and not on the musicality of it. Sometimes because sometimes with certain musicality can be a drawback.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Like,
No, 100%.
sometimes you want to feel the groove and just,
And sometimes doing the wrong thing ends up being more effective, right?
Exactly. Being musical is a hindrance sometimes because it makes you less creative in some ways. There's more restrictions with music, and with electronic music, I mean, obviously, good emotive chords and things that require a lot of musical knowledge are great, but also what's great about electronic music is the sonic landscape, which when you're thinking too much about music, you sometimes forget about.
Yeah. Keeping that balance is really hard. And I mean, obviously some artists fall more to one side or the other, and I don't know that there is a perfect balance, but it is interesting to think about having to try to unlearn things, because I think both you and I know completely untrained producers who are incredible.
Right.
And sometimes I look at what they do, because I have sort of an academic music background too. And sometimes I look at the completely untrained people. It's just like, Jesus, I would never have thought to break it in that way,
Yeah, exactly. A good example is my friend Jake Kill the Noise.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he doesn't really have a musical background, but his ideas are genius. I look up to him as a musical creator. I just don't know where his ideas come from.
He's one of a kind, man. I
Right.
love him so much. We've been trying to find a time to get him on this show because it needs to happen. His brain is one of the best brains I know, man.
Definitely pick his brain in public.
Yes.
People need to hear more.
People really do need to hear from him more. I want to get to how you met him and some of the other interesting people you've worked with. But before we do, I'd like to talk a little bit more about those early years and, from the days where you first started producing, the early attempts. Were you thinking at that time that music could be something you do for the rest of your life? Was it a thought to try to turn it into a career?
Yeah. Well, in the very early days, I really wanted to be a graphic designer. And after I wanted to be a neuroscientist.
Right.
But so music just was a hobby that I turned out to be kind of good at. That I uploaded my music to forums, and a lot of people liked it, and that's when I, decided, or at least fell into sort of making music. Yeah.
Sure. So the early feedback was supportive,
right?
And that's what maybe gave you the idea.
Without the early support, I wouldn't have picked it up as hard as I did, which makes me think now, like, it's harder for kids starting to get feedback, and I think how many great producers out there have just given up just because they didn't get feedback in the early days when they were still learning.
Yeah, no encouragement, and it's just so hard to even make noise because there's just this sea of static that is so many people trying to make music at the same time.
Exactly, because if you listen to my very first tune, they're complete crap, like everybody else's.
Right.
So I think if I didn't have some encouragement.
Is that something you try to do now with the label and with that community building we were talking about earlier?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because you have to spend your time wisely, and you can't just give feedback to every single person who sends you music.
Right, yeah, you don't want to open those gates.
I did try to do that for a little while.
Really?
And it was exhausting.
Oh, man.
And uninspiring, but
What are we talking? Like
Right.
50 a day, 100 a day?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like and a backlog as well. So
Right.
yeah, I realize that I try and be choosy with who I give feedback to and who I think has developed their music more, which is hard. And I just hope that there's others out there who give feedback to the more inexperienced artists.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's something I've started doing with this show too, is, I always open up the email address and all that and just say, if you want to send me whatever, feel free. And it's been cool, man. I mean, it's been a bit of the same problem that sometimes it gets overwhelming and sometimes, it's so beginner that I don't really know how to be helpful. But on the other hand, I have met some really great producers that I would have
Right.
never heard otherwise.
Exactly.
And yeah, shout out to everybody who's doing it out there.
Yeah. And, sometimes you have a question for them that, sometimes they have something to teach you.
Oh,
So,
yes. More often than not.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of the demos we get for Mad Zoo, I often reply like, how did you do that?
Right. Yeah, it's so interesting because everybody's process is different, and we're only now, and even in 2018, just a little bit getting into the point where there's a lot of formalized training for this kind of
Right,
thing.
yeah.
Like, it's only in the last few years that, the YouTube tutorials went crazy, Icon Collective opened up, all that sort
Yeah.
of thing. Maybe that's part of it. Like, do you like that there's always something more to learn?
Oh, well, I mean, it would suck if there wasn't. But
I mean, I guess that's true, but in a way, sometimes I get frustrated. Like, I'm just like, man, can't I just fucking be good now? You know?
Right.
Like, why do I have to keep, trying to figure
know.
all this new stuff out?
yeah, I think for me, I've learned that is what I do it for. Like, something about just being good and like being comfortable with that scares me. I don't know. Maybe it was the way my parents raised me, or like
Did they have high standards for your performance? And
everything? They're still very judgmental.
Really?
Like they have high standards for me for sure.
So how does that? I'm so curious how that manifests in present day. Like, do they look at a picture of your show and be like, the back looks a little empty?
Never with my shows, but I still send music to my mom. She says, this could be better.
Oh man,
And yeah,
that's amazing.
yeah, like they make sure that I'm always critical, and I don't hate them for it.
No.
It's a great thing.
I think
because-
we can all use critical voices that we trust, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Do your parents understand your music and the whole scene around
Oh
it?
yeah. My mom has been one of my biggest supporters for sure.
That's interesting.
My dad doesn't really understand it, but I don't expect him to.
Right.
He's very much of the past.
right.
But
Yeah, my parents are similar. They're extremely supportive, love it all, but
Right.
it's not their thing.
exactly.
Obviously.
Right.
Man, that's so funny. And so for you, you start posting music up, you're getting good feedback. How did you dip your toes into kind of the industry side of it? Were you pretty quickly approached to put some of the music out? How did that kind of evolve?
Yeah. I put out music on tiny little labels that approached me, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I just signed whatever, and
You didn't have management or anything like
no,
that
I
at
just
the time?
I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
I still don't to some extent.
Oh, same here, my friend. Yeah.
No, but yeah, I got screwed over a lot, like a lot of young artists do, and
People just sort of taking your music and
Yeah.
not really
exactly.
Yeah. Paying you or supporting you.
Right, and in those days, EDM wasn't even a thing yet, and nobody really cared about electronic music. So nobody cared if some little kid got screwed
Yeah,
over.
the stakes were much lower, right?
Exactly.
Was there money to be made? Were there shows to be played? I mean, there was
Yeah.
some scene, right?
Well, in Europe is where I started for sure.
And you were still in the UK at the time?
yeah, in the UK. Actually, my first professional gig was in the Netherlands.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What was that? Do you remember it?
Yeah, it was crazy.
What was that like?
It's great. I screwed up so hard. That's the biggest memory that's
Train
stands out.
wrecking?
Yeah, I train wrecked so hard. But Yeah, it was fun. I made a weekend out of it. You know, had a bender. And,
Right.
you know, I was 18.
Oh,
So,
perfect, man. And so obviously you were a producer 1st,
Mm-hmm.
right? And did you have any DJ experience before that first show?
Yeah. Actually, my first like DJing, like the first time I picked up a deck was at school before I was really producing.
Really?
Yeah, like some DJ called DJ Pied Piper, who's a pretty big garage DJ in the UK, was friends with one of the music teachers at the school. So he came in and did a sort of DJ lesson.
Oh, that is so
And I was
British.
Yeah. Growing up in London was awesome.
Yeah. God, that's amazing.
So yeah, I got the itch for that pretty quickly. And but I never actually owned decks for a long time. But I would
Sure.
always go over to my friends' places and practice. So I was already really into it.
Okay, so it wasn't one of those things where you got booked and then it was like, oh shit, I need to figure out how
Right.
to DJ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Luckily, there was still some DJ culture in the UK.
Right. Yeah. And so what year was that? Do you remember approximately
Yeah, that was 2003, 2002.
that you did the gig in the Netherlands?
Oh, no, that was 2008.
2008. Okay, cool. And what was the scene in Europe like at that time? Because, 2008, right around there was when I was coming up in Chicago,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I have a very good sense of what was happening in the United States, but not so much in Europe at the time. What was really popping over there?
My view was very limited because I was specifically in trance.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, dance music, that's when dance music was really at its peak in the UK. You know, pop music was dance music in the UK at that
Right.
point. You know, all the hits were like Axwell and like,
Right, those were like the number one radio
right.
hits.
yeah, and it's what everybody listened to.
Yeah.
So it was like then having it experiencing the same thing over here a few years later was interesting because it's like
Yeah, I mean that's the way it goes, right? Is that it always comes to the U.S. a few years later. You can always kind of look to the U.K., I think, in particular, to have some ideas about what might come in a few years over
yeah. I
here.
wonder if that's still true, but
I wonder that too. I mean, I guess I don't know exactly what is big in the UK for dance music right now. People tell me drum and bass is making a big comeback.
right, yeah. Drum and bass always has these waves that
Right.
always come back in every few years.
But I don't know that drum and bass can ever have an explosion here. You know what I mean?
I've thought a long time about this, and I don't think so either. Mainly because the culture in the UK has always it's how should I put it? It's like we had reggae culture that was part of mass culture. There was just people knew how to skank
right,
before drum and bass came along. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. The dance was already kind of, you had the muscle memory.
Right, exactly. It was already conducive to that style.
Right.
Whereas in the US, I feel like drum and bass is really successful in like the Latin communities where that sort of style of dancing already exists.
Sure.
But you have to have that style of dancing there first, I feel like, for it to take off.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think there are some, I was actually just talking to Muramasa about this, we were talking about grime and about footwork and kind of the similar way where they're so specific to where they're from
Yeah.
that it's really hard to uproot them entirely and put them somewhere else and have it work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the thing I hear most, because I still play a lot of drum and bass in the States, and the thing I hear most is I don't know how to dance to this. Which, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, if you had no idea how to dance to it, the music wouldn't make sense at all. It's just fast, and I mean,
Do you consider the dance floor when you're producing?
more so now than I used to. Yeah, when I used to, I didn't at all. Sometimes, but nowadays I do keep it in mind just because it's more fun to make
Sure.
music that you want to dance to.
Yeah, of course. And so how did it evolve for you? You play your first show in the Netherlands. I imagine you keep putting out releases. You keep playing some more shows. It builds. When did you start breaking back into the U.S.? Did that happen quickly as well, or was that a bit later?
Well, yeah, just as like EDM was coming up, I was coming up in trance, and
Right.
a lot of people were making that transition into EDM at the time, and yeah, I was no different.
Was it a conscious thing? Did you kind of see that wave starting to build and kind of realize that? Well, I guess I shouldn't even color it. But.
No, it's a good point. Maybe, I mean, from what I remember, the thing is just feeling really disillusioned with trance, and like feeling like it's really stale, and like I needed something new and fresh.
Did you feel that way internally, or did you feel that way about kind of the whole trance scene at the time?
Yeah, both. Yeah, I felt like my music was getting stale and the whole scene was getting stale, but I think maybe deep down, maybe there's something was to do with the fact that EDM was taking off.
Sure, and it's a new, exciting thing.
Exactly. I'm not going to pretend.
Right. Well, and we talked earlier about kind of that moment when you would decide to diversify and to start branching out and trying different things. I ask only because I was like a trance fan when I was much younger, and then I kind of lost track of what was happening with the scene. At that time for you, what did you see happening? Was it just not enough innovation, just kind of too many people making the same sounds over and over?
Right. It was, yeah, a combination of all of that. Yeah, I just felt like people were using the same sounds over and over, the same super saw, and to some extent I still feel like that. But now I don't care as much because I've been writing a lot of what I think is interesting, like trancey stuff with interesting sound design. And I think I was complaining a lot at the time because I didn't know how to do that with trance.
Right.
But now I feel like I'm more confident with my own productions, that I'm less bitter about the rest of the world.
Sure. I mean, that's a great feeling. And I think maybe, I don't know if you'd agree, but at least for me, I think as we get older and evolve personally, I can now sort of look back at what I originally loved about dance music and try to do something that recaptures that feeling that got me into it in the first place, even if it's not the exact sound.
Exactly.
And I mean, I don't know if it works, but at least for me, it makes me feel good. It's fun. You
Right.
know?
Yeah. So yeah, I just sort of reached a happy place. Yeah.
Are you planning to do more trance stuff now?
Yeah, I've got some stuff coming out on Anjunabeats pretty soon.
Oh man, you'll probably have some people really excited about that.
Yeah, it's been a while.
How long has it been?
At least 5 years.
Whew, man. And that's got to be fun for you too at this point.
Exactly, because I've been focusing pretty much exclusively on making good sound design and mixing and applying that to drum and bass, and sort of learning from all these amazing bass music producers. And I feel like now I'm at the point where I can finally start to apply that to like what I'm known best for.
Yeah, bring it full circle.
Right.
Yeah, I love that. And was it that moment when you saw the rise of EDM or whatever you want to call it? Was that when you started making connections with those other artists, bass artists, and people in different genres, drum and bass?
Yeah, I definitely, some part of me felt the need to reach out to these people and try to learn from them. And yeah.
How did that, at the start, how did that go for you? Because at this point, you had already put out your first album, right? Mm-hmm. Which, was that nominated for a Grammy? Am I right about that?
Yeah, weirdly.
I read that and I was like, man, I did not remember that.
Yeah, I have some friends to thank for that. You know, it's all nepotism on the Grammy panel.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
It's good to hear it from someone who knows. But yeah, what was, just very quickly, what was that experience like? I mean, did you even care? Was it like a big deal for you at the time?
I cared, not in a good sense, though. I felt it was kind of damaging to my psyche.
Really?
Yeah, it didn't
too much pressure?
Yeah, too much pressure. It didn't put me in a good place at all. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know where to go after that.
You felt like maybe there were some now expectations.
Yeah, no, it's
if you put Grammy nominated, then people expect something.
Grammy nominated means you expect to like try to get a Grammy in the future, which I wasn't going for a Grammy nomination.
Right.
You know? So that from that point on, I was like, well, if I don't try and get a Grammy now, it's like I've got this thing that I've never accomplished. Whereas I didn't really even think I had a chance of accomplishing that in the first place.
Right.
It changed my goals and my whole mindset, and it's taken a long time to get out of that.
Interesting. How do you see yourself? I mean, I guess that's a good way to talk about more current day. Like, how do you see yourself fitting into what's going on now? Because, we've talked about you were outspoken at certain points about, some practices you didn't like or, calling people out, all of that. And you said sometimes you would take a step back. But it seems like at this point, I mean, you've got the label, you're talking about all these new releases that sound exciting and fun. And it seems like you're reinvigorated, at least to a certain extent.
Yeah.
How do you see yourself where do you fit in 2018? Do you care anymore?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about that, I find it hard to really place myself because, I don't know, it's hard to stay relevant in 2018, obviously, but I think the only way really is to not try. If you think too much about it, then you're immediately going to start pandering to certain people and stop thinking about, and stop. I think people forget what their actual taste is sometimes.
That's a great point.
It's all about sticking true to your taste, but sometimes you can really lose track of what your tastes actually are because you think too many things get mixed up into what you like, and yeah.
Well, and it's what you just said about the Grammy nomination. It makes me think of that as well. I think we both probably know artists who have kind of gotten trapped inadvertently in something that maybe they're not so passionate about, or they wish they were able to do something else just because they were maybe chasing whatever that trophy is, whatever that brass ring that they're trying to get. And when you get that tunnel vision, you're completely right that you can sort of lose track of why you actually started doing it.
Exactly. And yeah, it's really hard to come back from that.
Do you think the game, the industry in general, has gotten better in terms of some of the practices you would call out in the past? People being treated poorly, ghost producers not getting their due or, getting respect or their name or whatever it is, certain bigger names being assholes. I mean, do you think it's gotten better at all? Or is it just kind of, have we navigated it better?
I think, I don't think that's gotten better, but I think there has been more interesting and honest and true artists that are getting a bigger platform. A good example is Rez.
Yeah.
It's just there's more exciting, big, exploding artists that are interesting and honest, and not all of them are like cookie cutter.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's another inspiring one, which I bring up because I know you have a connection. Is you look at what Porter Robinson did with Virtual Self,
right?
Which is a project that I'm sure nobody was telling him he should do, and probably some people told him he shouldn't do. And to watch him sort of go from Porter Robinson, arguably one of the most successful electronic music projects in the last 5 years, 10 years, and to just step away from it and to do something weird that nobody asked for, that's just based on his influences from when he was a kid. I mean, I love the whole thing is so inspiring to me.
He's a great example. And I think it's doing pretty well as well.
I think it's doing great. I mean, you're about to go on tour with him, right?
Yeah.
How did you meet him originally? How did that come about?
He was really into my trance stuff when he was like starting, and he invited me to go on tour with him with the M Machine, and all 4 of us sort of became really good friends.
Yeah.
And 5 of us. Sorry.
Right. And did you, Easy, I think, was a song that broke you into a lot of new ears. How did that come about? Was that just sort of like a working on something with your friends kind of song?
It was something we were working on the bus, actually. He had a studio set up in the back. And Easy was one of those ideas that I started. I had this vocal and a chord idea and gave it to him. He was like, I'd love to do something with it. And we made that. And he made, I should be fair, he made a lot of that. Like I took a step back from like the production of that a bit because he was on a roll.
Right. Which is the way it goes sometimes. I mean, collaborations, you never really, I think maybe DJs can tell who made what sometimes, but the public never knows. It's kind of whoever's got the hot hand, right?
Right, exactly. And at the time, it was his bus and his studio in the back. And I don't know, I just wasn't really in a studio mood on that bus tour.
Sure. Yeah, well, being in a studio mood on a bus is a hard thing.
That was also my first bus tour.
Oh,
so.
really?
Yeah.
How did you handle it? Do you like touring in general? Do you like being on the road?
I mean, the first bus tour was so exciting and, it felt like you're in summer camp. And
Yeah.
And then every tour after that becomes a little bit less exciting. And now it's to the point where, just like keep your head down, get to the next city, play your show.
Man, I feel you. Is there anything you do to keep it fun? Are there little tour rituals or things you try to do while you're in a city?
Well, definitely changing up my set is the main thing that keeps it fun. But meeting up with friends in various cities and stuff, the usual stuff.
Yeah. Has the glamour of kind of, the jet setting, has that worn off a bit, the appeal of,
definitely
being in a city every night?
Oh God, yeah. I was like raised in a sort of rural area of Cleveland.
Okay.
So I really miss like greenery and like just nature. And so traveling from city to city, from hotel to hotel can be pretty tiring. Yeah,
I agree, man. It takes it out of you in a way that's really hard to describe unless you've been through it.
Right.
Yeah. How do you do it now? Like, do you balance? Because I'd imagine you could tour as much as you want to at this point. Do you kind of have a system for it? Do you go, okay, I'll go, 3 weeks on, 2 weeks off, anything like that?
I don't think I can really tour as much as I want to. Maybe
really?
That used to be the case, but nowadays it's harder. And I don't release as much music as well. Hopefully I'm going to start releasing more music because I've got a lot of backlog.
Sure. But having your own label is probably conducive to that, right?
Right, exactly. It seems like now it's harder and harder to get gigs you have to keep like pumping out music. And
there is that pressure again, man. It's another one. It's what we were talking about before. You can't stop, right? And if you stop or take a break, at least personally, I just hear this voice in my head saying like, "Oh, you're fucking up."
Right. Yeah, but that is still not the case.
Right.
It's like you have to go. So many people said this. I don't know who first said it, but you have to go away to come back, and it rings true.
Do you change anything? I think about the idea of, sort of reinvention, like from the show you're doing tonight, the house music tour, to going on tour with Virtual Self. Does the way you perform change? Does your set change?
Yeah, it definitely has to.
Well, right. I guess I'm asking if that's like fun and interesting for you.
Yeah, 100%. I always I start doing a tour like this house tour, and at the beginning of it I'm really excited to play house music because it's like I usually switch it up a lot, and then by the end of it I kind of want to switch it up again or play drum and bass or something else, so I'm really lucky to be in the position where I can do that, where people book me for different things, where I can play different styles, because it must be really frustrating for a DJ that doesn't want to always play what they're known for and not being able to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm really, really lucky to be able to,
Yeah, it's interesting, man. I was talking to Wolfgang Gardner kind of about this idea, and he at the time I talked to him was very over the electro sound that he had become known for, and he was saying he wouldn't play the hits anymore. He was like really trying to make a whole nother style, and since then he kind of found his way back to it,
Yeah.
and really doubled down on that classic Wolfgang thing, and seems to be having a really great time with it again. But man, I want to talk to him again to figure out.
See where his head's at now. But yeah, it always comes back at some point. Like I said, I was really fed up with trance and all that, and yeah, I just had to sort of find that childlike innocence again, and yeah, have
Do you
fun.
feel
with it.
like you've got that vibe right now?
At the moment right now, yeah.
Well, maybe that's a good way of talking about sort of what you have coming up, what you're excited about for the future, what people should be looking out for. What's coming up next for you that you're really stoked about in the next 6 months, 12 months?
Yeah, I've got a drum and bass single I'm putting out on Mad Zoo, and I've got a little EP for Anjuna Beats, and I've started another sort of housey, trancey thing for Mad Zoo as well. There's loads of music coming.
Are you doing more with Jake with Kill the Noise?
Yeah, we've been working on that for so long, and I feel like that's all nearly ready. I can't talk too much about that.
No,
though.
that's fine.
I
That's
really
fine.
want to, but
No, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
What's it like when you guys get in the studio, man? I'm so curious what that vibe is. Does one of you handle, drums? Does one of you handle synths, or is it just kind of all over the map?
Yeah, we both handle the workload equally. I've never worked with anyone like that, actually, where everyone does everything.
Right.
Yeah, it's usually one has a specialism, but we both share drum design, synth design, musical ideas. Like some of the things that we're making, you would think that I made, but Jake actually.
Oh, interesting.
It was his idea.
That's so
like all the
cool.
music, like a lot of the musical stuff was him that people would think was me, and like a lot of the drum design and synth design that you'd think was Jake was actually me.
Oh, that's so fun.
So it's been a lot of fun. Like, I think, we've just given each other an outlet to explore new things.
And maybe I think that's the best thing a collaboration can give any of us, right?
Exactly.
And what are your goals at this point? What keeps you here? What keeps you excited? Say in a hypothetical 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, what would you want, Matt Zo, the project, to look like?
Yeah,
I know that's a huge question.
I know,
but
and I try not to think about it, honestly.
that's probably smart.
The thing I hope is that, Noisia never go away, so I always have someone to because having people that really set the bar. I don't know what I'd do if I didn't have anybody that I was really looking up to in terms of sonic landscape and yeah.
Well, and maybe that, you talked earlier about how it's only in the last couple of years you felt a little confident in your sound design, how it took you a really long time to feel like your music was even quote unquote good and these high standards. I mean, do you think that's part of it, that you really can't let yourself be too comfortable?
Right. Yeah. You have to be uncomfortable with yourself to be a good producer, I feel like.
And to be an artist, probably, right?
Yeah, exactly. Any craft.
Man, well, I love that note. I think that's an awesome way to leave it. Is there anything we haven't covered, anything you want to get out there?
Artists on my label, Crash, just put out a great single yesterday called Birds of Prey. Check that out if you haven't already.
Awesome. Yeah, we do. I'll throw that up on the Spotify playlist for this show.
Nice. Yeah, that's... I love Crash, everything he does, but this tune's really awesome. So.
Hell yeah. Any other artists, anything else you want to plug coming up for the label?
This year, it's mainly just myself and maybe Swarty, who's our label manager. He's from the M Machine. I don't know if you know him.
Oh, awesome. No, I've never met him.
Yeah, so he might have another EP as well coming up. So
Sick.
yeah, look out for that.
Fantastic. Well, we usually like to end just by asking a really simple question. You don't have to think about it too much. We're kind of just looking for like random access memory. Just a time in your life, and this could be something recent or for something in your past, a time in your life when music really, in a moment, deeply affected you. And that could mean changed the way you think about something. It could mean just gave you goosebumps or made you cry. Anything, sort of the first thing that pops into your mind. It doesn't have to be significant.
Well, I guess it would have to be, I know this is a really typical one, but hearing One More Time for the first time.
Oh, no, that's huge. That's a perfect one.
Yeah, no, it changed my life.
Do you remember where you were?
I was in my basement. I was 8. I was watching Much Music, which is a Canadian music channel.
You got that in Cleveland?
Yeah, we got it illegally.
Oh, wow.
That was actually my first exposure to all dance music. But I heard that for the first time, and from that moment on, that's what I wanted to make. And I didn't know what it was.
You're right,
So,
right. That's beautiful.
That's the first thing I can think of. If I thought for long, I probably could have thought of
No, it's even better.
Answer,
That's why we don't even. It's like I don't even tell people to think too hard because I love. That's beautiful though because I mean, even if you play One More Time at a show now, you still get that childlike reaction, right?
Exactly.
And there's something special about that.
Yeah.
No matter how much of an anthem or how overplayed something is, in those moments, man, it really can't be beat.
And I was like I loved rock music, so I was like headbanging and playing guitar to death.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I was the same. I was a metalhead growing up, and I treated electronic music kind of the same way I treated metal for a long time.
Yeah, it was hard, and it had the same energy to me.
Yeah, no, literally, yeah. My brain kind of thought it was the same thing.
Right.
And I don't know if that's just wires crossed or...
Yeah. Exactly.
Fuck it, man. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you for taking the time to do it, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Had a blast.
Yeah, thanks for
have a
having me
good
on.
show. Yeah, 100%. Have a good tour. And that's it. I'll talk to you later, my friend.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Peace. All right, that's the show. Shout out to Matt Zo. Great to talk to you, man. For everybody out there listening, don't forget, Matt has a new track out right now called Vice. He's got a brand new EP coming soon on Anjunabeats. Keep your eyes peeled for that. I'm a big fan. That was cool. My name is Willie Joy. You can follow me on all social media at Willie Joy or at BackToBackPod. You can also email me, backtobackpod@gmail.com. I'm here for whatever you want to talk about, whatever you need. Holler at me. Don't forget to check out the Back to Bangers Spotify playlist that is linked to in the description of this episode. And that's it for this week. Next week, it's the 75th episode of Back to Back. We have a special guest. This is a big one. I'm excited to share it with you guys, but you're just going to have to wait till we drop it. Until then, I hope you have a great week, great weekend. Take care of yourselves. Be good to each other. For Back to Back, this is Willie Joy. Peace.